Thank you. We thought just some practical ideas and some what's it really like, what really happens when a small company approaches the surgical MIC and what we do. So our friend here came, what I want to happen is, I'm not going to do a PowerPoint here, we're just going to have his view. So I'm going to be the BBC interviewer and yes, she's going to do most of the talking. So in our office in Leeds, we're very fortunate. We have access to lots of resources to health economics, the clinical trials unit, most importantly the clinicians and the academics within the university and within the Teaching Hospitals Trust as well. So we're quite free to go and engage whichever of these people we feel are most appropriate. So the small companies that come to us and large companies as well, but this is geared probably more to the smaller companies, so they'll come to us with their device and then we have to work out the journey for each individual person that comes to us, because every journey is completely different. And V and I find it most enjoyable in that it's very challenging and expands our minds greatly. But I think that, as you've probably seen, there isn't a pathway for MedTech. Everything is completely different in the way that farmers have got their pathway to market. There isn't a straightforward pathway. And so very, very briefly, my background, I started life in finance and business planning in manufacturing. And I moved on to NHS pathway redesign. Then I joined the university in 2011 and decided to stay. So, and Yesh will tell you very briefly about himself now.
Sure. I'm the founder of a company called Scalpel Ltd, as you would see there. At Scalpel, what we do is we help hospitals improve surgical safety by building digital software that automate certain protocols in surgery, like confirming surgical safety before every operation, count surgical instruments, measure theatre utilization for every procedure.
So there's a little picture to photo. That's the extent of the PowerPoint. So, Yesh, would you like to explain a little bit more about your products, which we call OR Bot?
Sure.
Maybe even where the name came from, because I quite like that name. That wasn't what it was called when it first came to us. So
yeah, so I think what I would do actually is give you an overview of how it actually started. So we essentially, well, I come from a healthcare background. I was trained as a dentist and went into oral maxillofacial surgery training. Spent 5 years building technologies for surgical training and improving patient safety in the past, and then started working on Scalpel 2 years back. Essentially because I was one of an evidence for a never event in the NHS. We were actually very close to having a never event. How many of you know what a never event is? Brilliant. An event that shouldn't have happened if all the safety steps are done appropriately is a never event. And in my case, it was a wrong processes in a patient. And I could actually feel the heat of the surgeon standing next to him. So we realized that it's a problem. We had a extensive market research with about 37 surgical teams in UK, EU, US, and in India. Realized that it's a global challenge of improving surgical safety, and that is the time when I reached to V. Actually, it was in 2017 December. There was a grant by SBRI for surgery, and that's how the relationship with surgical MIG started. And we were calling it Smart Check then. Smart Check is a way to effectively confirm safety checks in surgery. But what we actually realized is it's not confirming safety checks that is very important for clinicians. It's actually making sure that there are different elements other than just the safety checks that help in surgical safety. And that is how we moved from a simple app that confirms safety to an AI assistant in the operating room, and that is the reason we call it OR Bot, which is an operating room robot of software robot of sorts to help in surgical safety, and in this case, it's helping in counting surgical instruments automatically by using computer vision.
So Yesh came to us with his idea. He came to us for help. He perhaps wasn't quite sure what it is that he needed help with. We put out our call to the people within the hospital, and one of the the colorectal surgeon within our group took this on board. and he put us in contact with the head of theatres and also an anaesthetist as well who was interested. So we went off to see the head of theatres. He introduced the head matron, who was very, very keen on new technology. So we kind of tapped straight in, very fortuitously really, tapped into the very people who were keen to try and develop. And I think at this point there's one comment, because she did some early work with patients to see where the clinical need, so important to establish the clinical need. And I think the patients said, I can't believe that this isn't already out there in the theatres. So I think very early on Yesh knew he was on the right track. So we engaged the right people on board. We can also access Health Economist, which is part of stage 2, I think, of what we're going to do. So if you could just explain about the steps that you, at the start of the journey, what did you think you were going to do? And then when you came to the surgical MIC, how did things change? So what did you think was going to be the journey for an SME at the beginning?
Sure. So I think one thing that I've learned firsthand, and I just wanted to get an idea, how many startups are in this room? Wow, good. And I'm sure you would all agree that it's bonkers trying to sell to the NHS with so many people making decisions at so many different levels. And actually there's a publication in Times as well as in Financial Times saying that you would actually spoil your health trying to sell to the NHS. And if you're talking to an investor or a VC, and if you tell them that your primary target customer is an NHS hospital, you would see blood rush out of their face. The reasons why this actually happened is because decision making happens at too many different levels, right from frontline clinicians who might use your product, patients who would actually find the benefit of your product, to managers who actually procure and make a decision for your for your product to come into the hospital. We had that challenge as well. It might appear that everything went on quite easily for us, but it didn't. It was a ridiculous 1.5-year journey to understand the right people in the space, partly because we were knocking too many doors to understand who is the right person at different levels. Surgical MIC is a great light at that point. So when I met Anita, we realized that there are a group of resources placed in one location, such as health economics, frontline clinicians, patients, access to even clinical study groups. So that which, for a startup you could actually spend 6 months to find these different pockets, we could find it in one place. That was amazing. And not just surgical MIC, they actually introduced us to trauma MIC. So we were fortunate to work with Professor Tom Clutton-Brock, based in Birmingham as well, to evaluate our products in their simulated operating rooms. So that is one way we build the network. But to get there, I think, I was actually talking to Anita before this, there is very less marketing material for startups to get an idea what are the resources available from the NHS side, like an NIHR MIC, for example. And I think that would be amazing if more startups get to know that there are these resources in these NHS trusts.
Okay. So we made our first journey together to meet the people in the theatres, and I just wonder if you can just explain to people, there were one or two key people and key things that happened early on which kind of changed the direction but also broadened the scope of what you were trying to do, which was kind of surprising at the time when we thought we were selling a product, and we were very surprised by what happened with Alex.
So basically this happened last year when in June we put an application for this competition called Future of Surgery by NIHR MIC. And the proposal was essentially to help them improve surgical safety, confirming safety checks in every operation using our app SmartCheck. Halfway into the project, there was a meeting with quality management and theatre matrons and surgical teams. When these frontline clinicians told us that, well, you know what, in addition to improving surgical safety, could you actually help us with counting surgical instruments? Because that actually takes us a significant amount of time in every operation. And well, we were anyway doing it in our product pipeline, but we didn't think that it would be the top priority for the frontline clinicians. Unlike I mean, I think the previous presentations were talking about medical device companies coming and selling their product into the hospital. We did the other way around. Because I'm a frontline clinician, we were actually building the product with these frontline clinicians. So we had a chance to be flexible with respect to what feature we could introduce first and in a better way than actually selling something which we already had. So we started off working with this instrument identification platform initially than the safety platform, because that is what they said they need. And the way we worked with is not just with frontline clinicians, but thanks to Leeds Teaching Hospital again, they introduced us to Bebron, and Bebron actually has Sterilab units which help in instrument sterilizations across North Yorkshire, and that is how we formed relationships not just with the hospital trust but also with a Sterilab site. And that's where things get quite exciting. If you are into surgery, you know that a surgeon opens hundreds of surgical instruments while they actually might use 25 to 30 in a single procedure, leading to a wastage of resources with respect to time as well as money in actually getting these additional instruments and using them or not using them. So we are currently in talks with Medtronic and JLabs as well to optimize surgical instruments for every operating procedure. And this only happened because we were talking to frontline clinicians who had a different need. So all in saying that you might see a different value proposition for your customer, but they might see it in a different direction. So it's better to talk to them in an early stage.
I wonder if I can ask what the key things were that you wished you'd known when you started off. Now, I think, to be fair, Yash has put a lot of work in. He's been very generous to say express the support that the mix helped him with. But he's been endlessly knocking on doors. 24 hours a day, he's knocking on doors. So can you give us a bit of an insight into how you found the doors to knock on?
Well, I think firstly it's about, we realized that there's no one straight pathway to sell to the NHS. Even the NICE guidelines, we were one of the startups to actually work on the digital health technology evidence for evaluation standards that NICE has built. We were one of the startups that contributed to it. The challenge with finding different resources is to know who is working with surgery innovation in our case. In your case, whatever the market research would be or the market scope would be, try to find the units that make the decisions, and that way I think you could find the doors to knock. But otherwise, what we have learned is essentially NHS makes decisions in a different time scales than a startup time scale. In 3 months we are running out of money, and our investors are asking what is the progress you made in the last week. And the last week we sent an email, we got a reply 2 days back, and not much has happened. So I can't give this response to my investors, so I have to speak to 25 people around, not just one person, and depending on that one person's response. That's the thing.
So just briefly to sum up about what you've achieved, because although we can't talk about it specifically, the grant offer has been put forward, but we can't confirm it just yet, so we've signed up the deal. But if you can just briefly say what your achievements to date and then what your plans are next. I think we've got about a minute to do that.
Right, so basically we build the product. There is no MVP in healthcare. There is nothing that is minimally viable. You have to build a product that works. There's no discount on that. So we built our first product. Now we have evaluated it for usability evaluation in simulation labs. We are now we just won a grant to run it in real world operating rooms for the next 15 months. And then the next step would be CE marking and understanding the procurement. None of this is linear. Everything is parallel processing. And we'll be working with multiple trusts, not just with Leeds Teaching Hospital Trust, because as I mentioned, our timescales are different.
Okay.
Thank you
very much. Thank you for listening.